As an advanced educational professional, how would you apply data and data analysis to ensure your continuous improvement plan is focused on closing gaps? First thing pretty much is just pretty much right now how I apply data and analysis is just, we collect the data and then we assess as a team. I assess my own class just on my own. In the future, I plan on being a librarian. So what I plan on doing is just to help the other staff members see what they need, help them close the gaps, just looking at the data, maybe as an outside perspective. And that's what my librarian does now. Just kind of comes in and says, hey, I see you need some help here. How can I assist you? Or here's some ideas that I have. And then the outcome is just to obviously close the gaps, see where the gaps are, and just what we can do either as a team or in my classroom to close those gaps.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Do you have a like a data warehouse, or do you have like a common, like even like an Excel, Google Sheets, or something where you submit all of your data?
We have a program in Canvas. We use Canvas, and so we have it all in there. But it's a new system. We're standards-based grading this year for the first time, and so we have it all in there. But we can't really see our data, so it's not really that consistent. So I have it all paper right now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I have it right here on my desk. I'm not going to show you. Anyway, so I can read it, but instead my team and we sit down and go through it all together. But no, we don't, as a district or a school, we do not have a good data warehouse, which I hope to get soon.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, do you want me to go on to the next part?
Yeah.
Will you ask a question?
Yeah, I haven't been keeping track of time, so.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to look at everything. Yeah, that's really about what's been helpful so far with the data and data analysis is, when we meet as a team. And in the past, we used to have a Title I coach, but our school is no longer Title I. So our Title I coach would come in and go through our map data and and help us get more ideas. So I hope, and we can do that more together just as a team, or in the future be able to do that more as a team, since we don't have our Title I coach. But as a librarian, maybe I could be able to do that in the future.
Yeah. So how do you look at your state assessment data? Like, do you and your principal sit down, or just your team, or do you just personally look over it?
Well, I only teach third grade, so we don't get the results until later. We don't really use it in third grade. So I'm on leadership. So over the summer, we look at the results and kind of plan for fourth and fifth grade. And we kind of make a plan for third grade to see what we need to do to get the plan better for the future in third grade for the school year. But we don't really use. And for third grade, at least, we don't really use it much.
Okay. So it sounds like you don't have like a common place where you submit your data. I'm just following like having to paraphrase. So you don't have like a common warehouse or a consistent like analysis schedule or meetings with anybody to analyze your data. So that could be.
No, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Yeah. No, you're fine.
We have like PLC days, but this year's only been focused on our standards-based grading and what standards we're focusing on, what standards we're grading, what we're going to do with those, and how we're going to hit those standards. So that's this year has been. Hopefully, once we figure out standards-based grading better, we can get back tying in more map data with our standards.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay.
So it sounds like this is maybe your first or second year for doing that standards-based grading.
It's our first year. Yeah.
Okay.
Transition. How are you liking it?
I really like it. I wish, I don't know, the way we do. I like the standards-based grading part. The actual it's very biased grading at points. So I don't really like that part of it all. I wish I could just pull in a number like a math test and be like, all right, 85, and that's it. But it's more like 1s, 2s, 3s, and 4s.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So it's just different all around.
Yeah. So it's just getting used to all of that and then having to submit it, but also how to utilize it. It's a big process.
Yeah, for sure. So, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I guess now is Brad's turn to do the whole thing.
Very good.
All right, ready, set, go.
Good. So looking at this as an advanced educational professional, how we would apply data and data analysis to ensure the continuous improvement plan in my district or school is focused on closing gaps. Taking a look at the background information, we're a pretty small school. We're hovering at about 300 to 400 students for the entire district, K through 12. So we're real small. And as such, we have smaller pools of data to work with. And we have less measures than some of the larger districts I've been in the past. So as far as the current collection and data analysis, we use Ames Web to assess math and reading, whereas we collect data on just your percentage grades. And then we also do standards-based grade cards. We're in it's a third year of implementing those. And like you've mentioned, we see a lot of bias in that and a lot of just kind of subjective grading. And one of the goals that I would have in the data process and looking at this continuous improvement plan with our data is really making a point to apply the data we have, both the summative assessments through things like Ames Web, as well as our formative daily assessments, to make that a little less subjective and have hard data to know this is why the student is meeting the standard or approaching a standard or does not meet a standard. And really that would drive us more and more towards an individually targeted plan for each student, where we're addressing what standards they need and filling in those holes and gaps according to an individual student's need, rather than just kind of shotgunning it for the whole class. Yeah. Yes, we're ready for clarifying questions if you guys have any.
Okay, I want to. What's Ames Web? Is that your data warehouse that you use?
So
that is.
Ames Web is kind of like Dibbles or other assessment tools. So we have math side, and so they've moved most of it online. And so students take I think it's about an 8-minute test. At least that's what it used to be. I'm not as familiar with the new one. We just switched over this year. And they would do 8 minutes of looking at what would be recommended content and problems for third grade, which is what I teach as well.
Okay.
And so they have some computation, and then they have just fluency-based problems where they're purely saying, hey, add this, subtract this, divide this, and they've got some more application-based on the math side of things. And the reading, you've got a comprehension test where they read through a passage and they're filling in words to make sure that they have comprehension of it. On the other side is more of what you would see with Dibbles, where it's fluency and words per minute read and accuracy. That just kind of gives us some baselines as to where students are at. We do that 3 times a year, spring, winter, and they're at the end of the year also.
So after administering that, and maybe you mentioned this, but do you meet as a team? Do you meet with like your building principal or like a data coach, or just like your grade level partners to discuss those results?
Technically, yes. In reality, no. So I'm the only third grade teacher.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's it. Because you're small.
I suppose I have a conversation with myself.
There you go.
Our building principal is currently our superintendent as well, so his time is very limited. So
yeah,
that's something I'd love to see some more communication. Elizabeth, you mentioned getting together with the higher grade levels, and that would be great on my perspective of this first year kids take assessments. I'd love to be able to build some of those lines of communication and give a heads up of here's some kids to keep an eye on, here's some things to watch out for in future years.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, you could definitely use those in transition meetings, and even comparing data with the next grade, with the 4th grade teachers, and seeing where their gaps are and how you could better prepare your students for 4th grade, and then your 2nd grade meet with those teachers and how they could better prepare their students for when they come to see you.
Exactly.
Yeah, that would be helpful.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm glancing through here.
Okay. So what have you found to be the most helpful from this class or from this course?
Oh, I didn't even see that one. Okay.
I didn't either.
Well, it's just like they share what seems most helpful and what you might do next.
Oh.
Gotcha.
Yeah, you address that, Elizabeth.
Oh, good.
Yeah, you're good.
Great. Yes. Great.
probably the most helpful thing would just be the reality that data is not this ethereal concept that's out there. I mean, you always hear the term data, and it's like, oh yeah, I should be using that, but what does that actually mean? There's a lot of practical tips and suggestions that bring that down to a level that I can actually start using in my classroom. It's a little convicting because I know I'm not right now to the extent that I need to be. That's definitely a good place for improvement.
It makes it seem a little less scary.
Yeah.
Yes.
I agree, though. I don't feel like I use my data enough either. So I feel like that's just a constant goal. As as educators, we're continually trying to improve ourselves. So good goal for all of us to have.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Very good.
All right. I guess it's my turn.
Very good. As you get started, just a heads up, I'm at about 11 minutes. It looks like we've got a 15-minute screen recording, so we might have to pause in the middle of yours and start screen recording videos. But
okay, sounds good. So as an advanced professional, how would I apply data and data analysis to ensure continuous improvement? I definitely want to look at our school's assessment schedule. We talked about that in one of our most recent modules. We don't really have a schedule, and when I discussed it with my principal, he was like, oh yeah, I've been meaning to send an assessment schedule out to everybody. So, and I'm like, well, that would be really helpful when planning just lessons and units and things like that, to see when we should be doing this assessment, and then taking those results and effectively discussing them instead of like, let's discuss the assessments you took in October in February. I don't think that that's as effective. Teaching kindergarten, I take assessments formally and informally constantly, especially with like letter names, letter sounds, sight words. I'm constantly collecting data, and we're pulling it from all sorts of different resources. And I'd like to weed out some of the assessments that we do and really just focus on the ones that we can really utilize. I feel like I'm doing a letter name assessment, and then our title team's doing letter names assessment, and then they do it on their NWEA test. And if there's a way that we could soften that so that it's not so repetitive and we can just really utilize it to its fullest, I think that would be really helpful. I also, being in the kindergarten level, I'd like to know how I could use my data to help set my students up for first and second and third grade and beyond. We have the third grade reading law that's in place now, with students that fall below the grade level or the expected reading level by the end of third grade, and they are supposed to be retained. So it's a pretty intimidating law, and I'd like to know how we can start preparing them in kindergarten to prevent that from happening by using consistent assessments. The kindergarten team's using something, the first grade team's using something, the second grade team's using something, and I just think that really mixes up the data pieces so that it's not necessarily consistent. So that's my plan, is to hopefully get everybody on the same page.
That's an intimidating law. Where are you stationed?
I'm in Michigan.
Michigan.
Yeah.
Man.
Yeah.
Are the teachers happy about that one?
No, they're not. We create individual reading improvement plans for each student, so our data is really focused on reading. We do not collect a lot of math data. We collect a ton of reading data, and it's almost like too much, because then we have all these data pieces, and how are we going to apply them? How are we going to get together as a team and discuss, okay, this is where the gaps are, this is where the standards we need to really hit heavy on. So we're trying to be super data informed, but it's almost too much at once. Yeah.
Sounds like a lot.
Intimidating.
Yeah, definitely.
So if they don't reach a certain level by third grade, they repeat?
They repeat third grade. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Has that happened yet?
It will start with last year's kindergarten class. By the time they reach third grade, that's the year that it'll begin.
Okay. It's a lot of pressure.
It is. Yeah.
And there's not, like, they gave you this law, but they didn't give you any, like, resources to go with it?
They gave us these IRIPs, these individual reading intervention plans, but we don't, it's basically like your general title plan. We'll work on sight words every week. We'll work on this every week with this student. But there's no data collected at our school. Yeah. Okay, are we gonna have to pause?
We are, yes.
Okay.
I just found